you. Very nice to meet you. Where are you actually at this point?
I'm in Vancouver, BC.
Oh, in Vancouver. On the same time zone.
Yes, yeah, it worked out really well. Well, thank you. I don't know if you've had a chance to look at the project at all, but what I'm doing is I'm interviewing and talking with people that represents various human archetypes, whether it's scientists, philosophers, artists, religious, spiritual leaders, and I'm asking pretty much the same set of questions, and I'm contrasting the perspectives.
Okay.
And the first question I ask everybody is a general one. How would you describe the current state of the world today?
The current state of the world?
Mm-hmm.
Bifurcation, critical, on the edge. For some social, cultural reasons, but even more immediately ecological. And it's not being paid enough attention because right now it looks okay, that's not very okay, because I think this kind of a heat wave in September, for example, is already not okay. But people don't realize that you can reach points of no return, these critical tipping points, after which it's very easy. You cannot go back, or it's very difficult to go back. And we don't know just when those points come, and people are ignoring for the time being that we are heading in that direction.
So what would you say are the forces at play in this world? Because obviously our species is at a tipping point, as you just mentioned. And I would imagine, I don't know I know what your viewpoints are, but I have to ask you anyways. But what do you see a purpose for all this grand play that's going on here?
You mean a negative play, or for life altogether?
Well, how do you see it? How do you see what is the purpose of all this conflict in are we innately conflicted?
We are on an aberration period. We went on the wrong way with our consciousness, with our mind, because when you reach that level of consciousness evolution, where you can perceive yourself in the world, not only the world, most other species perceive the world. And when you can see yourself also, you distinguish yourself from the world, and you say, this is me, and the world is that. And not the I-thou, but the I-you relationship. And then you can start disregarding the world or putting false interpretations of it. Once you can interpret, you are free to interpret well or badly. But up till now, when you are on a lower level of evolution, or not lower, let's say less evolved level, which is not necessarily a value judgment, then you don't make interpretations. You accept what there is. And most other species, practically every other species, accepts the environment, accepts the nature as it is, and actually attempts to, not consciously, but by instinct, by necessity, fit itself into it. We are making a distinction between us and the rest of the world, and we can put all kinds of interpretations on the rest of the world and on us to serve what appears to be our immediate interest. What actually doesn't appear to be an immediate interest, it appears to be our basic interest, but we actually are our immediate interest, which in the long term don't work out. So we are, to put a systemic term, we are sub-optimizing the world. We are creating conditions that are good for a small minority, which is the human species, and a small minority of the human species, which are the people who hold the power and hold the wealth, hold the resources. And the rest is being marginalized, and this whole system, the whole wholeness of the system, is breaking apart. It's no longer coherent. And that's our problem. This incoherence in the human body spells disease. When you have a total incoherence of a group of cells, doesn't join anymore the rest of the cells, then you have cancer. When you have a blockage of relationship or energy flow or information flow between one part of your body and the other, there's disease on that part. And in the human world, we are in the natural world, and in the world of the web of life, in the biosphere, we are a kind of a disease. In the worst case, it could be a cancer who sort of kills the rest, but I hope we don't do that. We are not there yet. But we are certainly are looking at our short-term interests, our own advantages, at the expense of the rest. Not everybody, and not all societies, obviously, but the dominant culture operates in such a way. Dominant culture in politics and in economics. And culture is, to a modern Western kind of culture, mindset is undergirding this belief by finding all kinds of interpretations for it. So those are many kind of interpretations that we can go into if you like, but the point is that we are off onto a tangent in the modern world, which is a separation of ourselves from the rest of the natural world, from the rest of the universe even, and we are pursuing that path as if it was a sustainable path. But it is not a sustainable path. The question is just when it collapses, and before that, when it reaches the point where it will be difficult to move back from a collapse.
Well, would you say that conflict is a part of our conscious evolutionary process, or is it just, as you say, an aberration?
That level of conflict is not part of the evolutionary process. I mean, every species that evolves fits itself into an ecology in some way or another. Obviously, there's a food chain, necessity by necessity. There's competition between different species for resources. But I think the overall trend, the overall driver is, or attractor, if you like, is the harmonizing, is the fitting, is the bringing together, is to creating larger wholes from existing wholes. And that's the natural pattern. And the aberration is to disregard that, to believe that it doesn't exist, and to create instead an artificial belief system, which can, as you say, for example, it can just give you the support for the belief that that conflict is a natural state, and the stronger wins, and the devil take the rest. Basically, that is a dangerous aberration.
Do you believe that there is a higher power or a supreme being of some sort, or an intelligent designer for the universe?
There's an intelligent design. It's not a casual, not a random universe. I don't think it interacts. I don't think it's a kind of a deity sort of who actually takes in hand and interacts. There are the laws of nature. The laws of nature are very embracing. They give you enormous level of coherence, which we begin to understand in the physical universe, also in the biological universe. On the social human level, this kind of coherence is sort of semi-hidden by the many different kind of worldviews and value systems that people come up with because of their ability to distinguish themselves from the rest of the world. I think ultimately, at the basic level, the world could not have existed. I mean, the actual space-time could not have existed without creating systems that are coherently related to other systems. They are internally coherent and environmentally coherent. That is the basic attractor, if you like. And within that, there can be variations. And when you have a conscious system who is not conscious enough to know its own good, but is semi-conscious, then it can make mistakes. And we are in that period where these mistakes are being made.
Well, would you say then that we do have free will as beings? I mean, it seems to me that people can't even...
Yes, within the rules of... Yeah, within the rules of the game. I mean, think of a game of chess, for example. You have the rules, but the rules don't dictate what moves you make. It only tells you what moves are legitimate to make. So the laws of nature tells you what is possible. But how you go about it, exploring what is possible, and within that possibility, what is optimum for any given point, for any given subsystem, element of the system, that is not determined by the rules of the game. That is determined by each individual system. So I think, but the question of freedom and free will is relative. The more complex the system, the more of its factors of determination are internalized. In a simple system, the factors are external. The system responds. It's a chemical reaction. There's a conditioned reflex. There are all kinds of built-in automatic responses. You higher you go up on the level of evolution, the more of these internal factors, the so-called intervening variables, as behaviors, not man behaviors, but behaviors would call it that, between the stimulus and the response, the intervening variables are internal. And these internal variables give you that level of freedom. So for any given stimulus, you can respond to a number of different ways. And that is the level, the possibilities of freedom.
So why is it that it seems to be a tiny percentage of individuals within the system of humanity that is actually seems to be conscious of its actions in relation to the whole, whereas the vast majority seem to be unconscious of that?
Not sufficiently conscious. We are semi-developed. It's been many times being sort of said that we are not almost semi-divine. We didn't reach the full level of divinity, but we are past this sort of the animal level where we are not aware of anything. We are not robots. We are already have a level of recognition of what the world is like. But on the whole, we are not generally yet on that level where we recognize what is truly good. Now, let me add something to it. I believe that people, healthy, normal people, I'm talking about criminals, asocial beings, but normal, healthy people, if they are confronting with the alternatives of action which is coherent, which is consistent with the general good, then I think they would instinctively move in that direction. I believe we have deep survival orientations. Instinct is a difficult word to use because it can be misused in so many different ways. But we are oriented as social beings. We would not be here unless we had that done. We would not have this history of 30,000 years of pretty more or less conscious existence, knowing our mortality, knowing what we are in relation to our environment, even if we don't know it properly, but recognizing that we are in an environment, recognizing that we are something that is here, that have a finite lifetime, and that we can relate to others. But you're not evolved enough to know that that who we are is really essentially part of the rest, that we are not categorically separate, that we are not we and the rest. We are all we, basically, at definite levels of coherent, different levels of communion, I would say, of collaboration.
So what is the common denominator that can actually unify humanity in this time? You know, because I've spoken to billionaire capitalists, and his point of view, one particular one, his point of view was that his goal was to wake up richer than he went to sleep. That's his mantra. So you've got that force working in the world. What's going to unify and millions that follow that philosophy? What's the unifying force that everybody can agree with?
Survival. I mean, ultimately, it gets down to that. If you don't do it, it's not going to be very good because you won't survive either. It's like talking to a cancer cell. Don't just reproduce yourself at the expense of the others because ultimately you'll kill yourself. And I think that's when you reach that point, that's the only thing that makes sense to people. You better come and become part of it and do something. You can do well and do good instead of just, doing good at the expense of doing well, or do well and never mind doing good. Those are the awful alternatives. We can do both. And the common denominator is that we are all part of a system, whether we like it or not, we are, and our survival depends on our collaboration or our cooperation, to use a popular term, on the level of our oneness.
So is the solution reason? Is it spiritual? I know you did a TED talk and you talked about love as being a common denominator that could unify purpose.
Well, love is an attractor. I mean, it's there, present. I mean, I think it's there between the proton and the neutron in a hydrogen atom vis-a-vis the electron, because it attracts the electron, I mean, this kind of mutual attraction, which builds up the individual quanta into complex systems, that is there at the heart of the universe. So that was just a point to make, that it only gets expressed more and more explicitly when you have a higher level, more evolved system that has a brain and a nervous system and a perception, and ultimately it can break through to your consciousness. But it doesn't necessarily do that until you reach that higher level. So we are between the animals and the angels, someplace at a dangerous place where we could jolly well destroy the entire system that brought us forth.
How do you foresee that change can take place in this world? Do we need more disasters?
Probably, yes, but hopefully not irreversible ones. It's a dangerous game. It would be better to have perceived crisis rather than real crisis, and get a perception of a crisis. And we know that there is both the carrot and the stick, the stick has to be very real, but you also need the vision, which is the carrot, of getting us past the current state, knowing that we can build a better world. Both of them. We need vision and we need recognition of our position. We need to have those kind of questions that you are asking being asked more generally.
What do you think are the steps that an individual can take to develop that sense of with an individual within a whole?
Yeah. There are some keywords you can just say: maturity, Stop being so goddamn childish, and primitive, and look around, open your eyes and look around. All the great traditions, whether it's religious or spiritual, or nowadays even in the level of more conscious psychology, etc., talks about awakening, opening your eyes. And that can be done even by people who you don't need high level of education or sophistication for that. The concepts are very simple. Every child understands this concept. We are artificially educated out of them. I'm always struck, for example, when I live in Europe and I visit the US, although I'm formerly an American citizen, but now I live in Italy, and have been quite a few years, decades. When I come back, I'm always struck here with something that you have less of in Canada. But here in California, everything is incredibly commercial. You can't open your eyes, you can't see anything else but advertisements. Everybody's selling something. Everybody wants to make a buck. I mean, that seems to be what's driving this whole civilization. Now, there are very many kind and intelligent people who are beyond that personally. But the civilization, the culture as a whole, is strictly the short-term self-interest culture. Just do well for yourself, and that's what counts, basically.
For you yourself, when you have moments of internal conflict or despair, how do you center yourself? How do you maintain your equilibrium?
I'm very much centered on developing some concepts in a coherent way that show our connections, that show even on the connections. I'm right now working on two books. One of them will be published next week, and the other one will be probably next year, which deal with our coherence between life and death, or beyond death. And so I'm very centered on looking for meaning, and the meaning I find is the coming together of parts that were separate and forming larger wholes. So I realize that's not everybody finds that, and that doesn't necessarily work that way, because there is such a thing as disease, whether it's individual or collective, and the disease can be fatal, in which case it just won't proceed anymore, not on this planet and not in the foreseeable couple of million years. But I think sooner or later in the universe, this trend, this evolving symphony that I sometimes call, is something that is moving forward, which is a really basic trend. You don't have to have life in the cosmos. I mean, it's that it altogether appears is an indication of some very basic drive, will, design, call it whatever you like. Because the physical probability for life is overwhelming. Improbability is overwhelming. It's extremely difficult for systems of that level to come together and maintain themselves in their environment. Need a very high level of coordination of all their parts to the single drive for being, so just existing. And that is happening still, and we're finding more and more that it's happening. Recently, a year ago or so, they found that organic molecules exist even in the neighborhood of active stars, for example, which they thought was physically impossible. And here they are. These organic molecules are coating these proto-planets in such a way that they are there as basic building blocks when the planets cool down and become at the proper orbit, enter into proper orbit around an active star. There's an energy flow. Then these molecules are there already to join together and create proto-organisms. And that seems to be a much more universal phenomenon. It's not accidental. It used to be thought a couple of decades ago, life is just an unlikely accident in the cosmos. Not at all. It seems that it is a basic drive going in that direction. It's the same kind of drive that moves from hydrogen to uranium to a complexity, and from simple molecules to complex molecules to biomolecules, etc., and then simple organisms to complex organisms. Actually, to entire galaxies and to systems of galaxies. The drive is there. The trend is there toward coherence, toward organization. To me, that is a very basic factor in the universe. It means that the universe is not a meaningless chance aggregate. It's a drive toward, which I would even say in my newest book, I'm working with this concept. It's a drive toward self-recognition in the universe, toward cognition, consciousness, through which the nature itself, which you can call the cosmos, seeks to know itself. That seems to be a very basic drive, and our individual consciousness is a part of that drive.
Would you say that individual or consciousness actually is that drive personified?
It's a manifestation of that drive.
If that is the case, sorry, go ahead.
No, I'm just mean the drive is there in the cosmos. It's there in the laws of nature. It's there in the logos of the cosmos from the Big Bang onward. And there could be other banks, so it's not just this one. I think it's there. Our consciousness is a part of that drive. Now, I don't reduce our consciousness to the brain. I think it exists as part of a cosmic consciousness, if you like, or the drive which exists in the world. Otherwise, the world would be a random assembly of various levels of disjoint particles, a casual, temporary association of particles. The fact that it is a coherent cosmos that is bringing forth this level of aggregation, of complexity and coherence, means that there is a basic drive in the universe. And our consciousness, I believe, is not a random factor. It's almost like a holographic projection of the cosmic mind. So I join those people who talk about the idea that there is only one mind, and we are part of it.
If that is the case, can humanity do wrong? I mean, can we really step outside of that imperative?
A lot of species have become extinct for various reasons. Now we could become extinct due to the failure to recognize in time that we are part of it. The instincts are there, but as I said, we have this fatal or critical, I would say fatal, the critical freedom. We can recognize who we are, or we can misrepresent, misunderstand who we are. So that is a danger, and the universe is not a predetermined harmony. It's not necessarily moving in that direction. It has the freedom to unfold along the lines of this cosmic drive toward coherence and toward cognition, I would say also. But and locally it can be reversed. It can just, it can be filtered out. It can fall out of it just like any ecosystem, any given system can become extinct. It can drop out of it.
And I imagine it always finds a new equilibrium, I would imagine.
Eventually it will. I think it will.
So
unless we really create a level of radioactivity on this planet which it will take millions of years before it will find again the basic conditions for life to begin again. So we have this tremendous power to locally actually to reverse the trend for a very, very long time, even in a cosmical sense, long time.
So I know you've been at this for a long time. How do you get through to people?
I don't worry about it too much. If it makes sense to me, I try to communicate it, and I hope that it makes sense to others. That's what I've been telling you. It's the same philosophy. I don't know if it makes sense to you or to people that you communicate with. I'm telling you what makes sense to me, and I hope that this sense can be communicated.
But you feel compelled, obviously, to share your insight with the world. Obviously, you care enough that you would like to help shape a more conscious species.
Yeah, I can't help it.
So you don't feel despair?
No, it's it's an adventure, but I use it in the sense in which Alfred North Whitehead called one of his books "The Adventure of Ideas." It's adventure. It's a venture that is coming, and it's tremendous to be part of it. To be tremendous to be a reasonable, conscious part of it. It's exciting, and it's a challenge, and it's a challenge that you're here to live up to.
So how do you define yourself as a being? Um, um, Maybe it's a vague question, but this is something I try to get from people. I mean, do you define yourself by your actions, your thoughts, your where have you grown over your 80 some odd years?
So, say the last sentence. Where do you what?
Where have you grown?
Where you grown? I see. Becoming more conscious of what was before intuitive. Becoming more conscious of my basic intuitions. I say that.
And what would you say is the core value by which you measure your actions in the world?
Bring about a higher level. I mean, it sounds abstract, I know. I don't know how else to phrase it. Bring about a higher level of realization of who we are.
And were you always?
Because I think,
Sorry.
because we are part of the cosmos. We are part of this harmony, this unending symphony, and we don't know it. And to recognize that is a tremendous sense of. You can say it's love, but you can say it's a sense of communion, sense of belonging, sense of being at home in the universe, and that's it's a wonderful sense.
Have you always been compelled in such a way? I know you had your start with music at a very young age. That seems to. I was a musician as well. It seems like music seems to develop a certain abstract understanding of the world.
Because it's coherent. A harmony, a piece of music, if it's well done, if it's a masterwork, it's supremely coherent. You can't change any part without changing all the rest. And you're seeking that kind of wholeness in everything you do, because after the experience of music. So I always thought, when I shifted from music, I did a lot of, for many years, parallel, but I was professionally as a musician, and then when I shifted to go into the academic world, I mean, I continued to seek the experience that I had in music, which is the experience of harmony, of wholeness, of being joined, of being a part of. And I think I'm not saying it in any selfish or egocentric way, but I think we need more of that experience today. And art can help us that, and poetry can help, but philosophy can help. And I think programs like yours could help.
So do you think it's going to take 51% of the population, or is it an energetic critical mass that can actually shift the way we perceive this world?
We don't need a large percentage. It's the famous butterfly effect. When we reach a point close to the bifurcation point, we know that from the theories of Prigozhin and thermodynamics and all that, a very, very small little change, fluctuation in one part of the system can take over the dynamics of the system. The more the system is unstable, the easier it is to change. Well, obviously, it's easier to change also in the bad direction when a system like the Weimar Republic became unstable after the reparations that they had to pay at the First World War. Then Hitler could climb on a beer barrel and start the Nazi movement. And Lenin could move into Lenin, St. Petersburg at the time and become the head of a communist movement, which was well intentioned in the beginning, but became a dictatorship. So you can change it for the better or for the worse, but none of these people, neither Hitler nor Lenin, had anything like a majority. They were all very, very small, seemingly sort of powerless little fluctuations that got into power, got the power, all of a sudden moved to the center stage because the system was unstable. So the danger is that we are moving into this butterfly effect, into a worse, into a dystopia instead of a utopia. That's a danger, and that's why I think we have to think about the possibilities of the ways we could evolve, and not just sort of trust the good luck that maybe the right people and the right ideas will come along.
Well, you've had an interesting advantage of being on this planet for 80 some odd years. What have you seen develop? How have you seen humanity develop from your point of view? How has the world changed?
Well, if I think back of the closing years of the Second World War, of course, as a child, you don't realize what goes on, but if I think back of what those actually meant, how we had sort of a whole group of an army come into another country and just discriminate people and put them into concentration camps and all that could happen. I mean, some people, right now we know what's happening, but we don't know, but we guess what happens in the Middle East. I mean, all kinds of awful things are happening still. But at least in the Western world, that kind of criminal, anti-human, almost you have to use theological terms, the basic sin in the world that was represented at the time by this whole Nazi system. I don't think that could come about. At least in that sense, I think we have learned something. So that we can move forward with some level of security, that there is something in the world that maintains the basis, doesn't let the bottom fall out. And one hopes that the basic crisis, when it comes, it doesn't make that disappear, that basic sustenance level. So I think there is some positive development in that sense, that we are moving beyond the situation where we can make war just because we want to get some advantage, get a territory or something like that. Now, these local conflicts, there are lots of wars happening in the world today, and those are local, and I hope they're local. The concept of a world war, I think, is more remote, unless there is a geopolitical conflict that mushrooms because of the unwise, the adventurous use of arms.
And what about in terms of consciousness? How have you seen that change over 60 years?
I wasn't so in on being participating in people's consciousness. It was only started when I was starting getting into philosophy and future studies and that sort of thing. So I don't know how it changed from before. I really don't know. It's a difficult question. How does it change? I don't know if it changes altogether for the better. Certainly there is a group of people, there's a movement of people who are increasingly aware that some changes have to happen. But I'm more skeptical just now because I'm now, as I said, being plopped into the last few days into a very commercial environment, which is almost a shock to me because after living in Europe, especially living in Italy, you get less of that. You see. I mean, here you're just surrounded with it. Notwithstanding that, on the personal level, people can be very kind and very nice. And there is perhaps a basic level of security. If you watch the news streams too much, then you realize that it isn't even that doesn't exist because you see so much criminality like that. But I think there are elements in the world, are places in the world where you are much more surrounded by a more evolved culture than there was 40, 50 years ago, I think.
And how about you personally? Was there a defining moment for you when things shifted? Or was it just a gradual process? Because you were saying that you didn't consider consciousness at a younger age.
It was very instinctive. I mean, there are bifurcation points that are not single big bangs. Their phase changes several times. They're not linear, but they are not necessarily sort of all-encompassing. I mean, it changes. You had to change professions, to change lifestyles, moving from itinerant, concert artist to an academic, and then moving to the level of the Club of Rome, then United Nations, and so on. Then moving beyond that into an individual, self-styled or semi-independent kind of thinker and activist and writer. So these are who retired a long time ago. I retired when I left the UN in the mid-70s, went to a summer place in Tuscany for a sabbatical year. No, sorry, not mid-70s, mid-80s. Mid-80s. Went for a sabbatical year, and I'm still there.
So is there anything left in your bucket list?
I want to continue what I'm doing, and I want to find more meaning. I want to explore things. It's very exciting because I know that you can't, as a serious scientist, can't talk about channeling, but I do have ideas that flow. You can talk about flow. Things that come that are uninvited, and I want to follow those up.
That's interesting that you mentioned about, as a scientist, you can't mention certain things. And that seems to me what part of the problem these days. I speak to scientists, I speak to channelers, I speak to different people that have different ways of perceiving and acting in this world. And they all seem to have their own slots. There's no integration. Do you think that it's vital that knowledge become integrated?
Good knowledge that is timely and is meaningful, will eventually move, will spread. People can respond to it. If you can only, I just come back to this theme, if you can only get more time. Time is at the priority now. We are playing very close to the edge of the sustainability of this whole system. And you have to look at the signals and the signs, the unrest on the social, cultural, economic level, and the dangers of tipping point and the ecological level. They're all around us, and we have to become more aware of them. But if we get more time, I think the human mind will respond to the challenge, because we are a species, and I know big words, but we are a species with a built-in survival instinct. We wouldn't be here. We're very unlikely that we should have got this far as this already. And if we didn't have this survival instinct, which is a communal instinct, and then we would have killed each other a long time.
If you could speak directly to humanity, sort of a public service announcement for the world, what would you say to people? What would you say to humanity?
Well, the old thing that everybody's saying is a little inside. Wake up, look around, and find out that you are part of it. I mean, I know these are all shablons, these are everyday commonalities, but they have a deeper meaning. And the problem is that we are disregarding or participation. We are thinking of ourselves as separate. So come back to the web of life, to the web of existence, come back to the universe, ultimately. And it's very comforting. And it's also, it can be very positive. I must say that I haven't become an angel. I'm not very much good as an activist. I don't do very much about personally cleaning up messes and so on. But I try to disseminate the values and the ideas that are meaningful to me. And I hope that through that I can do some good.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It's a pleasure to meet you.
Pleasure.